Welcome to the third episode of In the 305 with Chairman Gilbert. This is the show where we discuss important topics impacting our community. I'm your host, Oliver Gilbert III, Chairman of the Miami-Dade County Board of County Commissioners and the County Commissioner for District 1. Tonight, a look at one of the most important and frankly, one of the funnest parts of my job. Every year, I get to take dozens of students from Miami-Dade County's District 1 on an expedition to, well, different places. The first year we went to the Grand Canyon. The second year we went to New York City, Broadway. Took them to a show. And this year we went to Washington, D.C. We call it the Chairman's Spring Break Expedition. And this year, 48 excited teenagers learned about the meaning of the American democracy in our nation's capital, Washington, D.C.
Beginning countdown.
Joining us tonight, some of the students who went on the trip. We have a senior, Shakina Montpremier, junior, Nia Simpson, and Julian Farrington, who's only in the 10th grade. Now, I gotta tell you, I need to know from each of you, what made you want to go on this trip? What made you want to spend your spring break in D.C.?
Well, for me personally, for starters, I've been to D.C. before as a 7th grader. So
A seventh grader?
Yes. So
How old are you in the 7th grade?
I was 12.
Well, that was a completely different time. Now, you
Exactly. So that's why I'm like, I got to go again with the chairman of Miami-Dade County to see D.C. through your lens.
All right. How about you? Tell me.
So for me personally, my family and I are all from Jamaica. So to have the opportunity to go to Washington, D.C. for the first time was like insane. I had never even imagined that I would ever get to see something like that in person. I'd only see it in my history books. So I really, really wanted to have that experience.
I like that.
So for me, I'm actually the same place as you are, from the Bahamas. So I only ever went to the Florida and the Bahamas, never outside of Florida or the Bahamas. So for me, when you came out with the news that you were doing this trip, it was just super exciting. I was like, oh my God, DC, I really want to go to DC. It's a new place, somewhere far. So I was like, I'm definitely gonna join it.
To introduce you to one of the extraordinary chaperones that actually took the kids out of town with us on this trip, Miss Natalie Joy Baldy. Welcome.
Pleasure.
Now, just to start off, tell the folks a little bit about yourself and what made you want to go, and how did you end up as a chaperone on this trip?
Well, I am the Director of Student Activities at Miami Carroll City Senior High School, where we took a few of our students on this trip. They were selected from the application that was presented. I became a chaperone because you and I are friends, yes. But you also know my work ethic. You know that I take care of people's children.
That's the important part. Listen, people don't realize how taking people's children out of town is like an emotional thing for the student, the chaperones, but also the parents.
Yes.
Parents need to be, and they trusted you. I trusted you. You did a wonderful job. Thank you.
Of course. Once they're in my hands, they're mine.
So what was the most memorable place that you visited in D.C.? The place that, we went to different places. We went to, the MLK Memorial and the African American Museum and Congress and the Library of Congress. What was the most memorable place to you personally?
For me personally, it was the cherry blossoms. So
the cherry blossoms.
Yes. So as you know, like pictures, they always exaggerate things. But when I actually got to see the cherry blossoms in person, it was the most breathtaking moment I ever saw in my life. The trees were just beautiful, the different colors, pink and white. So I actually wore a shirt that resembled cherry blossoms for the pictures on my Instagram. So I really loved how it just took my breath away.
How about you? Please.
Mine was the U.S. Capitol, seeing Dr. Mary McLeod Bethune, her statue in a room where very few black women are. That's what really captured me. And also I am in National Council of Negro Women, so seeing my founder in there, I loved it.
How about you?
For me, it definitely had to be the National African American Museum. I've just been genuinely shocked and amazed at how much African American history just all in one place. I especially love the way that the museum is designed, because it's like a constant history book. It's like I'm just turning the pages to see like things like Harriet Tubman's rifle or her dress, or see Rosa Parks' dress and her books and stuff like that. Like, it was insane to me. Even when we were going through, especially the Middle Passage area, where you could see how many slaves were transported along the transcontinental area, like across the seas and stuff like that. It was insane to me how many I'd never known, like 5.8 billion is insane to me from just Portugal alone. Like, just to see all of that made me tear up.
When we walked through the musical era, there were some moments where they were like, oh, I didn't know that person sang that song. Oh, I didn't know that person did that. Ooh, because they were also playing the music in the background. Mm-hmm. So, you know, they didn't know that there were so many different types or different genres of music that originated from the African American.
Black people, yeah. Was there one historical fact that jumped out at you and stuck with you with regard to this trip? It might have been at the museum, it might have been in Congress, it might have been the Library of Congress. You know, for me, I know that for years and years ago, I had gone to the Library of Congress and I got my Library of Congress a library card. And this year, while I was there, what I said was, I want to actually renew my library card for the Library of Congress. This is the National Repository of Information for the country, and I wanted to do that. And so I had an opportunity to do that, and I was very happy to. How about you all? Was there anything that just stuck there, a historical fact or something that emotionally just grabbed you?
Mine would be the fact that Thomas Jefferson, even after his library burned down multiple times, he still was resilient. He still kept creating one. He still gave back. So he would give his new books to the current Library of Congress, and that's why there's a room full of just his books. So
I remember that. And the volunteer gentleman who stopped and actually talked to us, and he talked to us about how he sold his first collection. He took that money and paid off some debts, but then he started buying books again because he believed in the collection of knowledge and the collection of books. He's an avid reader, avid collector, and how when the Library of Congress burned down, ultimately we restarted it with his books. I remember that was very it stuck with me also. How about you?
For me personally, it was this hallway in the Library of Congress where it was just basically a bunch of photos of different people. Like, there was one of Migrant Mother, who I did my AP seminar paper stimulus on that. So I was really excited to see like a lot of the paintings that like I'd seen in my history books that I wrote essays on, that I wrote papers on. And also there's a lot of photography that you could see like the person that they're taking pictures of. Like, you can just feel their feelings and capture their point of view on what they must have been feeling in that point of time. Like, there was one picture of Harriet Tubman, and she looked so strong, so resilient. And I was just thinking to myself, I was like, wow, wish I could have taken that picture.
For me, actually, it was one of the sites. So when we went into the Library of Congress, all at the top, you had to walk. And there's like a huge glass wall where you could just see the actual library inside. When I saw how many books, it was just memorizing, just know that there could be many books in that one place. From the outside, I was like, it's quite small, but then I guess it extended, and I just like, wow. And at the top of it, you actually saw a mural of Greek, what else? European. It was just beautiful. I'm like, wow. One day, like, they really had to take the time in.
It had all the different disciplines, and I remember that. That was very nice. Yeah, that was very nice. Yeah. You know, it was, when you stand up there and you look down on the floor, I was able to walk down there when I got the card, and they had this guy in the back with a computer, and I put my father's name in, and it pulled up like all of this information about it. It's so interesting, the information they have available to them that you wouldn't actually ever believe or conceive. It's also interesting, each of you picked as that memorable historical moment something from the Library of Congress, because it was very impactful for me also. Shakina, Nia, and Julian are not the only students I spoke with. I invited Kayla, a senior, and Sean, a junior, back to my alma mater, Norland Senior High, to get their take on our trip to D.C. We heard a lot about democracy when we were on the trip. What does democracy mean to you? What does democracy mean to you? Like, so, and we get different questions from young kids, different answers. It always blows my mind. What does it mean to you?
I guess valuing the different sections of government. You have the federal branch. You have the executives, you have the legislative and judicial. The separation of powers, when it come together, one governs each other and keeps it in check. I think that's true democracy, and how we value that.
How about you?
For democracy, for me personally, it's just hearing the people's voices with voting, and basically just hearing the people, because that's what the U.S. is for. We the people, by the people, for the people. It's the people, and we get to hear their voices, and we get to hear how they communicate and how they work together, and
what they want. So I mean, your combined answer is perfect, because you're right. It's meant to be reflective of us, and so you get to hear people, and how you hear them is through their vote. The vote. Was there something that you took from the trip that speaks to our democracy, where we were, where we are, and where we eventually will go? Is there something that spoke to you?
Overall, the Library of Congress and the entire building was just amazing to me, because even the Congress building, the guide said something to us that really stuck with me for up until now, and honestly, I feel like the rest of my life, where he said that the Library of Congress is constantly being rebuilt, changed, and expanded, because our country is constantly expanding and changing over and over and over again. And that really, really stuck with me, and it was so quite literal, because you could see that when we came out of the building, they were building more.
Building, yeah. and so that's kind of symbolic of our actual democracy. When we were created as a country, not everybody had a right to vote. Women couldn't vote. People of African descent couldn't vote. Essentially, white men are the only people who could actually vote. Yeah. We evolve our democracy over time. We evolve our democracy to include slaves and descendants of slaves. We evolve our democracy around 1920 to include women. We are constantly evolving our democracy. Just like the library expands, so is our democracy. It's always important to understand that it's our job to push that democracy forward. It's our job. It's meant to be reflective of us. And so if we're fair, it should be fair. If we're more inclusive, it should be more inclusive. Yeah. And so that's important. How about you? What stuck out to you?
For me, it was us being there as a group, especially since most of us are either 18 or younger. So us being the future, for us to be in those rooms where we see the Library of Congress being built over, where we see things like the U.S. Capitol and people who represent us being in those rooms. I feel like that really stood out for me, because we see it a lot, or we read it in books, but we're never in those rooms. So the fact that we were there, that really stuck out with me.
I know one of the things that we want to emphasize with the students is that Washington, D.C. is the birthplace of democracy.
Correct.
And so we want to talk to them about voting and how and I asked some of the students, I'm going to ask some of the students, hey, you know, do you plan on voting when you can? I'm interested in seeing their answers. What did you think about encountering the birthplace of our democracy? I know you've been in D.C. before, but do you vote? Do you plan on voting?
Of course, I plan on voting.
Yeah.
You know, when we got to that specific era of women being able to vote, there was a question. We weren't able to vote?
Yep.
Yeah. Let's pay attention.
Yeah.
We weren't.
So I always talk to young folks about the importance of voting. And the reason why I talk to them about it, and I talk to you all about it, is because I think that we actually need your opinion at the ballot box.
I agree.
Yeah.
So we need
agree.
your opinion. And so you're going to see things differently. Just in the election that's coming up this August, you have recreational marijuana and abortion on the ballot.
Huge topic.
Big thing.
Huge.
We just need to know,
big.
and this is not telling you how to vote, but if we're making all of these laws and these rules for people who are going to live 20 or 30 years or 40 years from now, maybe the people who are going to be alive 20 or 30 or 40 years from now should actually be speaking on them.
I agree.
How you see the environment, maybe you should be speaking on it. How you see whether people should have access to health care and what role government should play in that. You should be speaking on it. You're not 18 yet, are you?
I'm turning 18 this summer.
No,
You're
I'm
turning 18 in
17.
summer.
Just turned 17, yeah.
Have they registered you all to vote yet?
I haven't. I've been meaning to register, but I haven't gotten to it yet.
Well, listen, do you plan on registering to vote?
I do.
How about you?
Of course, yeah.
Do you all plan on voting? And I got to tell you, I know that I've asked these questions previously, so I know not all of you were dead set on voting. Let's have an honest conversation about that.
Well, for me, of course, I'm going to vote. I'm going to vote every election, whether it's a local, state, or national. I'm always going to vote because there was a time where someone like me could not vote, and with the way they approached the situation, they kept on fighting. They kept on being resilient because they recognized how important it is to vote, how important it is for us to vote those people in who are going to make decisions on our behalf, who are going to decide what our housing looks like, what our infrastructure looks like, what our policies are, whether they're local, state, or federal. So yes, I will vote.
Okay, how about you?
For me personally, at first, I have to admit this, that I wasn't too keen on voting at first. But recently, actually, when I turned 16 is when I started to really do my research on it. And, you know, a lot of people have told me, oh, why don't you vote? Why don't you vote? And I have to say, I never really did have a reason. I just never really thought that my individual vote would matter too much on terms of like a national level. Local government, sure, I would go to a ballot and I would go and vote. But on a national level, I never really did think that my one vote would really matter. But on a recent note, I've realized that even like this trip really set in my decision that yes, I want to vote, I need to vote. It's not necessarily that my one vote in a sea of people is gonna make too much of a difference, but the fact that there was a time where my gender, my people, as an immigrant, as a Black woman, there was a time where we couldn't vote. And I think that it's really important for me to take that opportunity and do that instead of just letting it pass by.
You know, it's interesting because you touch on something in your response that I fundamentally believe is a sentiment that's planted in our collective consciousness to dissuade us from voting, that your one vote doesn't matter. And so, in truth, the aggregate of that one vote and that one vote and that one vote actually determines the presidency. The aggregate of that vote decides what our foreign policies are going to be. It decides how we spend money. It decides all of where people can actually go to the doctor. People making you believe your vote doesn't count. Those same people are voting. Those same people are voting. They're going to the polls in droves. They're getting to the polls. So don't ever listen. If my vote don't count, then it don't matter. I'm going to vote anyway. If I don't like nobody on the ballot, then I'm going to pick the one who I dislike the least, and I'm going to vote for that person anyway.
Yeah.
But I'm going to vote because if the democracy is meant to be reflective of us, if I don't vote, then it's not going to be reflective of me. Yeah. And so I have this, and I know I have an interesting, different perspective because I'm an elected official, but I say all the time, listen, if you vote, you participate. If you don't vote, you get the government that you get.
Yeah.
You didn't care, because when you don't vote, what you're saying is, I don't care what you do, it does not matter to me. When you talk about government should be reflective, what concerns you? And we get a variety of answers from young folks. Like, what are the issues that are important to you?
Personally, I'd go with affirmative action. I know that's been an overturned, yep. It's a big one. I know a lot of kids haven't been getting the acceptances that they wanted. They get deferred or denied based off of their merit. They don't meet those qualifications, and I know it's been a big problem, especially with minority students. So I think that's something we definitely should tackle head on. And how we vote really depends on who could help us fight back to get what we need.
Okay.
So I think that's a huge problem.
Diversity and inclusion. Okay. How about you?
Me personally, the issues that are important to me is any issue that tackles human rights, like Black Lives Matter, abortions, women's rights, and anything of that matter, and climate as well. Climate change is also a big
Resiliency. So we get a lot now. Resiliency is a very important issue, the environment, because we really only got one planet. That we know of.
I want to preserve it.
Yeah, we know of. We only got one planet. And so it's challenging to see how if we continue to mess up this planet, that we actually survive as a human race. And so those other issues I think are always interesting, because there's always going to be a natural conflict about when you're talking about access to programming or accessing the funds. People will think that you're taking from one person to get to another. But we should all be able to agree that this is our planet. This is our collective planet. We need to be able to breathe the air, drink the water, eat the fruit. I mean, we need to be able to do that.
Right.
So.
And it's so unfortunate that the issues that I stated, like Black Lives Matter, women's rights, climate change, they're considered political issues when this shouldn't be considered political.
I agree too.
It's about the lives and welfare of humans. You're a human, I'm a human, everybody is human. So the fact that we literally have to debate on subjects like this is
This
so
is going to
weird.
seem strange, but you know how you stop that from being a political issue? By voting.
Yeah. It's kind of, yeah.
true.
The question was asked, has a small group of people ever changed the world? As far as I can tell, that's the only thing that has ever changed the world, as a small group of people. No matter how you look at it, if you think about things like the Catholic Church, it started with 12 people.
You gotta start somewhere. Yeah.
One man on the road to Damascus. You think about this country, it wasn't a whole bunch of people who were rebelling. It was a very small group. A small group of committed people have consistently changed the world. Imagine what you can do if you harness your voice through the internet and through social media with every other
platforms we have.
Platforms that
It's
they
so
didn't
important.
have. Often we talk about the future, but we don't actually have the opportunity to speak to the future. So you are literally the future that we're trying to build stuff for. When I talk about mass transit and housing and building resiliency in our environment, I'm talking about doing it for your generation. What are the issues that are most important to you?
For me personally, I think that things like measures that are put in place to bring people that look like us up, I believe need to stay in place.
How about you?
So for me personally, it's gonna be what's gonna happen with you. So currently, I was looking at some numbers. I'm very big on research. So it looks like USA in general, we went down in how many kids graduate. So it looks like more people are getting their GED rather than their high school diploma. So it's really people our high school dropouts. But for me, I feel like the high school experience, especially your senior year, is something that most people miss out on. Most people say, oh my God, I wish I could have gone to prom. Well, I feel like there should be something done. I don't know if there's something more curriculum-wise, or if it's just the way people are raised. But I feel like if there was a more actionable way to make students want to graduate, to really want to get their diploma, it would really cause our numbers to go up.
Mine would be enforcing the importance of voting. So like, for example, how Nia said that she once thought that her one vote didn't really matter. So incorporating things, programs, and just things in general that would reinforce the importance of voting. So maybe like a voting week in Miami where high schools would have different members of Congress or local government come and speak out to the kids about the importance of voting, or things like events that would just get youth more aware with how important voting is.
So we have participation in our democracy, we have access, and we have education and high school graduation. With regard to access, and you talked about affirmative action. I think that's so interesting because we've had a lot of activity around affirmative action, DEI type programs. And so a lot of that centers around the idea that there was always legislation in place to help groups that had been historically disadvantaged. Most of those disadvantages came from the fact that slaves couldn't receive an education and women couldn't receive an education and couldn't vote in years past. We've seen recently efforts to actually continue to roll those programs back, roll those inclusion programs back. So I just want to tie that in your head and to this point. You were the person who sat down and initially said that you didn't think it was important to vote. The people who make those decisions all are put in place by people who vote. So not only do you need to vote, you need to find people who actually think like you, and they need to vote also. Voting matters. It's always my desire for this trip to be something that resonates with you and something that stays with you. I want to provide an experience. And so I'm hopeful that this trip motivated you all and encouraged you all, not just in traveling to DC and having a fun time with each other, because I think part of the trip is actually learning to be with each other, and I think you all did a great job. This is a great group of kids, but also something that stays with you with regard to who we are and who we can become as a group, as a country, as a county, as a community, and so I hope that this did this for you all today. So this is one of my favorite activities. And so this is probably going to be one of my favorite shows. I firmly believe that exposing our students, exposing our kids to things that will actually broaden their horizons, it doesn't just help them, it doesn't just help our community, but it helps our country. So it's my pleasure to take these students to Washington, D.C. The year before it was my pleasure to take them to New York. The year before that it was my pleasure to take them to the Grand Canyon. Next year, I don't know where we're going, but it'll be some place that allows them to grow who they are, because growing who they are grows who they can become. Thank you for joining us. We'll be seeing you next month. If you missed any of our episodes, you can find them on islandtv.tv. And if you have any questions for me about any topic concerning our residents, don't hesitate to ask. Simply record a video of yourself asking the question and email it to ogvideosub@miamidade.gov. Have a good night, and I'll be seeing you soon.